Sometimes I just need to listen because I don't need to criticize you. I can already see how you're beating yourself over something that you did or something that you didn't do that you think you should not have done, and how much you're criticizing yourself already.
If I understood what we're talking about right now, like when I was 19 years old, as I was really beginning my relationship life, like you and I wouldn't be together because all my relationships would have been perfect or like definitely would have worked out. Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
Where it's not all black and white. My name is Sarah.
And I am Matthew. And this week, the best way to describe what our topic is going to come from a quote, which is actually the quote at the top of week 16 in the Lover's Journal.
Yeah, and the quote goes like this. It's by Joyce Meyer. We can improve our relationship by leaps and bounds if we become encouragers instead of critics.
Let that sink in, just how important that is in a relationship.
Yeah, the easiest person to critic is your partner and yourself.
Absolutely, because those are the two people that you, in theory, know the most. I mean, I guess when you're younger, before you are in a really committed long-term relationship, it's probably your parents.
Correct. Yeah, it's so easy. I see kids like just shitting on their parents, like my parents that, my parents this. But as an adult, it's like people become like super critic of themselves. And then that just turns out to be like the next person who you criticize and blame for most of what's going on, and what's going right or wrong in your relationship becomes your partner.
Right. And usually, like, I think a lot of criticism comes from like this idea that my vantage point is the right one. Like I have more overview than you do. And I think we've talked about this before too, this thing where like being either in an interracial relationship or an intercultural relationship, or from just a different family where you have totally different kind of family cultures, that you bring these two things together and then you're like, the world, like you think that because we all speak the same language or whatever, that our understandings of what the words mean or certain underlying expectations, we assume those are just there, and they're not necessarily, right?
No, I can't think of it right now, but right before the podcast, I was talking to you and you just couldn't understand what I was saying, and I got frustrated. And I was about to say something, and then I was like, Sarah, first of all, you are on the phone. And as you can hear, like I have a thick accent, and sometimes I'm like, at this point, at this stage of our relationship, like you should be able to understand every word I say, but I'm like, sometimes I don't even understand what I'm saying myself. So how do I expect you to understand me? And it just took me a moment because I was like, wait, what? Like you don't understand? And I just took a deep breath, and then I spoke slower, and then you were like, oh, okay. Like you got what I meant, but I could see in that moment, like there was a language barrier between us. Anyway, and I was just like, you know what? I'm not gonna be like Matthew. By now, you should, I could go whichever way. It's like, because of my accent, you don't understand me. Because like we've been in the relationship long enough. You should be by now. I could find so many stories to run with.
And criticize me.
And criticize you for not understanding. And I think a lot of criticism comes from like, you should have, I should have.
Also, kind of along with that is like these certain kind of expectations that we bring. So it becomes, I feel like it can be really easy to jump into that space of criticizing and listening to you say that. It's like, one thing is that if I'm so daft that I can't understand certain words, I'll take the total responsibility in this scenario for whatever it is, of like, I'm just not getting it for whatever reason. Like, I guarantee you that you jumping down my throat, like you should know better by now, would probably be less helpful than if you're like, you know what, like, how do you encourage me? Like, I'm going to slow this down because I really want you to be able to get that. I want you to
Yeah.
be able to, when I speak in these certain ways, I want you to be able to kind of pull through it. And I think I mentioned to you at one point how with my best friend who's German, and when we speak, like, my German's pretty good. I'm a fluent German speaker, but I speak it so infrequently that words fail me, or, frequently when I'm speaking because I speak so infrequently. But my best friend knows me really well. So when we're having conversations with other people, and I can be talking, and I realize that when I'm with Benny, my German is like almost impeccable. And the reason why is because if I pause for a second, like I'm trying to come up with the word, or if I say it in a way that's a little bit unclear, Benny fills in the word or clarifies my sentence, and nobody else notices. Like we've been best friends for 30 years or something. And I didn't realize until the last time that I was there that how much of like that's part of our relationship. And I bring up that story because like that's an encouraging, like he encourages me. He's not criticizing me.
Yeah, he's not like, you should say this, you should have said that German word this way.
Right. Or like nobody understands you when you say it that way. Like he could do that, and we probably wouldn't be best friends because that would hurt my feelings. And then I would limp away, licking my wounds of pride. But I think there's just kind of that those are these ways that we fill in, and you and I do that too, which is
So there's like I really like that, but for me it's like, I speak English all the time, and English has become my first language, but there's some moments where I'm tired, and anyone who like English is not their first language will understand this. It's like my accent, maybe now people can be like, what is she talking about? Like, I understand her completely okay, but I just had a nap, to be honest. By 9 p.m. is like the tired I get, the worse my English and my accent become, because I stop thinking. So it just depends on what time of the day. And since I spend so much time with you,
I get to know your best and your worst.
Correct. And sometimes I make no sense to myself, to you, to anyone. So it's one of the things, like there are words in the English language where I can't pronounce them. And even when when we lived in Kenya, there were words in Swahili where you could not pronounce them, and I would have to help you pronounce it. So I still need your help in like helping me pronounce a word. Even today, I think I asked you like how some town we went to, like it was a Spanish word, and you also speak Spanish, so you helped out. Like I want you to help me learn. So there's like criticism and feedback.
Right. Or criticism versus critique. And also one of the things since we're really talking about encouraging versus criticizing, like how do you like deliver it also in a way like timing is an important thing, and how can I or you, when it's around me, how do we deliver it in such a way that it is encouraging? Because you can say virtually the same thing.
Yeah, the tone and...
Yeah, or even like the timing, and I haven't heard many people say this. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, like, I finally realized that if I hurt somebody's feelings by the way I speak, even no matter what my intentions were, if it wasn't so clear that they are upset, then I have to take responsibility for that. And that's a fairly unusual, like backwards way in some ways. Like you have to take responsibility for your own feelings. But I think that there's a radical responsibility, which is I actually can't impact how you think. And I could be Gandhi and speak to you in some way, and you could take offense to it. But there's still a lot for me to learn, and I can still take responsibility for that. Yeah. And I think that is just so key. Like, can I become a delivery ninja, or can you become a delivery ninja? So that way, when there are things that you know that you need to impart to me so that you can encourage me to be a better man, to be a better boyfriend, to learn something that I'm not doing very well. Like, I need that. And you want me to have that. And can you actually also at the same time, while not being at fault for my reactions, can you still take responsibility in, like, if I take it wrong, like, what do you get to do? And vice versa.
Yeah. When you do something and you come to me, like, sometimes I just need to listen because I don't need to criticize you. And if people got to understand that, is like, it's so important. When I come to you with something or you come to me with something, like, I can already see how you're beating yourself over something that you did or something that you didn't do that you think you should not have done, and how much you're criticizing yourself already. Like, I don't have to add to the salt.
Oh, man. If I understood what we're talking about right now, like when I was 19 years old, as I was really beginning my relationship life, like, you and I wouldn't be together because all my relationships would have been perfect or like definitely would have worked out, because like you just said, when you are beating yourself up, as soon as I add a little salt to that wound, I become the jerk for adding salt to the wound. Where if you're just sitting there festering in your wound and realizing, oh, I screwed up, you deal with that because you do not want to feel that way.
No.
And the anger that you feel towards yourself, because I've made this mistake before with you, where like you're feeling really bad and I come and be like, how could you do that? And immediately all that anger you had towards yourself is just like, that's yours now. You get all of that anger that was directed at me, silently angry at myself. Now I will loudly give it to you.
I learned that lesson in my 20s and I was really angry. There were like things going on in my life that made me like lash out onto strangers and to people. And one time I was at a supermarket and this guy I don't know what happened. And I did something that I thought he did something and I responded with my anger. And he just didn't say a thing. And he was like, I'm sorry. And I felt like shit. You know, because I wanted to engage. I wanted him to be like, say something mean so I can justify my meanness. And I think after that, like, I was like, lesson learned. You
really?
know? Yeah.
And there's never been an issue since.
Can't say that, but it's been an issue a couple times, but I learned the lesson.
Yeah.
I can't say like I don't know better. You know, I do know. Do you want to talk about like recent criticism you have had?
Yeah. Do you have something in mind?
I actually do. Let's talk about, we're in the market for a vehicle and we should have,
in air quotes.
Yeah, should have already bought a vehicle because we started looking, I don't know, 2 months ago?
Something like that.
We were like, you know what? We are staying in the US and we need a vehicle. But we're like, we have time. And now vehicles have gone up. Gas has gone up. What else has gone up?
Well, there's a shortage of microchips at the moment, so there are not as many new cars as there normally is, which means used cars are now selling at 20 and 30% above market value, just as we are in the market for a used vehicle.
I know. And there's something that keeps coming up. Like, why did we wait? We should have bought the vehicle because we know we need a car. Like, we should have, but we didn't.
Yeah. And in some ways it was like, I just didn't want to rush. We're renting a car. We have it through the end of May or something. So we have at this point, we still have another 3 weeks or so, which is in theory plenty of time. But it was like, I wasn't pushing to hurry up. I was like, let's just wait. Like, what's the rush? And also, like, I sold cars in my past. I bought quite a few cars in my lifetime. So the process is kind of like fun, but also like I like to get a good deal. I'll be honest. I like to get a good deal. And so, for me not feeling like the rush, and now we're like, oh my gosh, we could easily spend 20 or 30, we will spend 20 to 30% more than what we wanted to spend on a car, simply because we waited 2 months too long.
This is what makes our relationship great, is like when I make a choice to buy a car, I just buy a vehicle. When I make a choice to buy something, I'm changing a little bit, but my decisions are made really quickly. You get to sit with your decisions a little bit. So I've been known by my family is like, if I decide something, is like, I could decide like I'm moving to Japan tomorrow. And that has been known that I'm not moving to Japan, but if I decide something, I kind of don't give it a lot of thought. And that has really helped me in the past. But now as I'm like getting older, I'm like, choices that involves a lot of money, like I need to think through them. But still, I'm not like you, where I sit with choices. And so kind of like a little bit like I was thinking that you could start self-criticizing. Did you self-criticize like we should have bought a car when we did?
I did for probably somewhere in the ballpark of a day. I don't usually regret or or wallow on things for more than a day. But sometimes the intensity within that day can be pretty big. In this case, yeah, I definitely for about a day I was kind of kicking myself over it.
Yeah, and we were talking about like what makes our relationship great was like, oh, it's also because I was like, you know what? Like, so what? We didn't buy it 2 months ago. Like, why criticize ourselves for it? Like, maybe I was right. We should have bought it then. But who also knows?
You never know. And
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is great is that, first of all, we had this, it's not necessarily the best example of something you could have held over my head, but we're going to spend, between a few hundred and a few $1,000s more than we had wanted to spend on a vehicle. And like that could easily be something that you could criticize me about. And, the other thing is, well, if it was really that important to you, you could have,
gone out and bought a vehicle.
You could have done it, right?
But I didn't.
But one of the things is this kind of like this flow. And then even today where like we actually had this opportunity where now we have a friend who happens to have a dealer's license who's like, I can help you find a car and we can probably save you the same amount of money that you otherwise, would have saved doing it on your own, driving around a bunch of different places, trying to negotiate a better price. I can just get that better price for you probably through my dealer license. We'll find out in the next 24 hours. But there's this thing of once it's already happened, the thing that's become so interesting is even if it's like a big problem, right, is that we can kind of look pretty quickly, and it can take anywhere from, a couple hours to a day or two to get over any stank or anger we might have about an issue that comes up. But then it's like, okay, since we can't change the past, what do we get to take from that to actually like learn from that and to where even if there's some pain that was caused by that mistake, that what's the problem with pain? Like, that's not a problem. We learned a certain lesson. Some lessons hurt. When you learn how to ride a bicycle, that might hurt because you're probably going to fall and you're going to scrape your knee. But you have to scrape your knee once or twice while you're learning how to ride a bicycle in order to be able to do it.
Yeah.
You have to make mistakes or hurt yourself a little bit when you are living, and you can either dwell on it or you can learn from it. And in a relationship where my mistake impacts you, right? Like I was like, let's wait until we actually need it, which is at the end of May. Well, let's not rush. So we could say that that's my mistake. It now is also has an impact on you because it means there is more of your money that is gone.
That happens a lot in the relationship. I think for me, the lesson there is that you just don't know about the future. We could have bought like the worst car. And we didn't know, like our friend would not have been like, oh, I have a dealer's license. Actually, what happens is like there was an issue with his dealer's license. So just now, as of yesterday, his license wax, maybe he didn't, something, who knows?
And we also realize now that the car that we really wanted, the two vehicles that we had settled on, are now the vehicles we don't want anymore.
Exactly.
So it actually gave us more time, but it could have been easy to dwell on, we're spending a couple $1,000s more instead of we're actually maybe getting a couple $1,000s more in value because we actually gave ourselves the time to kind of go through it. And I think the ideas that we can actually learn from it, or that also like, we're in a relationship, and what is kind of like the end goal of the relationship? If the end goal is like to retire with a couple $1,000,000 in the bank or whatever, then like, okay, then that might be a little bit painful. But if the end goal is not an end goal, but is actually, let's live right now in our lives where we are enjoying each other and when we are really being present with each other. And we're not living for tomorrow or when we're in our 60s, but we're living for the best present moment we can have, then criticizing a mistake is actually completely counter to what our best life goal could be, which is really being present with each other in this moment. We're going to take a quick little break here to share with you our sponsor. And when I say sponsor, I mean The Lover's Journal. If you've been following along, you're probably pretty familiar with The Lover's Journal. It is a 160-page guided journal for couples that we do every week. And I have to tell you that we have been getting like messages and emails from people who have gotten their own copies of The Lover's Journal. And we get these beautiful messages of like, we did week 3 together last Sunday night, and I can't tell you how much it's helping us get in sync in our relationship. And I'm like,
yes,
which is so cool, because this was, the love and care that went into creating The Lover's Journal was not a vanity project.
No.
It was like, even in the question around developing it was, what can really offer real benefit to people who have it, not just something that somebody wants, but something that when somebody gets it and uses it, their life is actually better for it. And literally every week we get some message, whether it's like we tried, this first monthly challenge and we're just having so much fun doing it. Or it's our date afternoon at the park where we go and we do journal together and then we share what we wrote. And so this is wonderful right now. If you go to the website, you can find it at either theloversjournal.com or loversunlimited.co and use the discount code podcast15. You'll get an extra 15% off whatever specials are going on the website at the moment. There are 2 packs where you can get 2 at already a discount, and the podcast 15 gives you an even bigger discount off of that. So go ahead and check that out. And the Lover's Journal, helping us to help couples all over the world celebrate their love and relationship.
Yeah, so let's go back to self-criticism and criticizing your partner.
Let's do that. Let's go back to self-criticism and criticizing your partner. What a better place to go to.
I was thinking that the other time that I criticize myself so much recently is like when I say something that I think is dumb. Okay.
You beat yourself up on that a lot.
Oh my God. This is the worst. So if I say something that I think is dumb, or something that I think I should not have said because it's hurtful or it offends someone, and I have lost sleep over saying something dumb or something that I think is going to offend someone, because I have my own rule. I don't think it applies to anyone. Like, I just feel like if I'm going to say something that is going to offend someone, I shouldn't say it. But I'm also a human being. I get to say things all the time that offend someone. And that's why sometimes it's so hard for me to even do this podcast, because I'm worried I may say something that people don't agree with. People think it's dumb. People think I don't have, I don't have the authority to speak on it. And so I choose my words sometimes too carefully, because I'm worried about what people are going to think. And it's not so much what people are going to think, it's what I'm going to think about myself. And I come home and I'm like, oh my God, I should not have said that. That was so stupid. That was so dumb. And I know some people have they criticize themselves and how they look. I don't have those issues. I look at myself in the mirrors and most days I'm like, oh my God, I'm so beautiful. I'm so gorgeous. But so that is not my problem. My problem is self-criticism on shit that I say that I should not have said.
Right.
And you get to experience that.
I do. So I want to not criticize you for criticizing yourself, but actually encourage you to really be who you are and allow those chips to fall where they may. Because in our relationship, if I make a mistake, you're willing to you're so gracious about my errors, like 90% of the time, maybe 80-20. But you're really, really good about letting me make mistakes and being, well, then let's just see where that takes us. Pretty beautiful. And what about giving that to yourself of like, you know what? Can you be as gracious with you as you are with me? I think it's worth it. And in some ways I'm surprised to hear that, because you're a very strong and powerful and forceful human being. That's always going to mean that like whenever you put yourself out there in the world, you're actually setting yourself up for a certain amount of failure.
Yeah.
And that's like kind of cool.
Yeah, I need to learn like how to navigate that world of like, not censoring myself so much because of, so that I don't say something that I think is dumb,
Yeah.
And even when I say something and it offends someone, like I think like that's not the intention, because I think like intent is really important when you say something. It's like I can also be like, if someone says like I'm hurt by this, I can also take full responsibility and say like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you, but not saying it because I'm worried I'm gonna hurt them. And then if I say it and I see like, their demeanor changes, then I feel so shitty for having said it, and I beat myself up for that so much.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of read that quote one more time as we close out. We can improve our relationship by leaps and bounds if we become encouragers instead of critics. Do you have any little bit of sort of insight for our listeners for how you can do more of the encouraging and less of the criticizing?
I think it comes when you stop criticizing yourself. I think you become better at not criticizing your partner.
That's great insight. I think for me, it comes about being curious with where that turn takes you.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you rear-ended somebody, you can easily, or your partner rear-ends somebody, you can be really upset. Your partner was texting and they rear-ended somebody. You were texting, you rear-ended somebody, whatever it happens to be. Right? You were distracted. Like you can be like really upset about that. But I think if it comes to curiosity, then the thing is not like, why did that happen? But why did that happen? Like what is in there? Like what was in that? Like, I bought a bunch of crypto and I lost a amount of money in it. Or I should have bought a lot of crypto and I would be a millionaire, but now I'm still like living in a cabin. Like all of these different things that you could look back on instead of like, what was the lesson from that? What do I really need to get? If you do something that's just like, oh, I can't believe you did that, Sarah, would be, what is that actually going to provide to our lives that we never would have found out otherwise?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode of the Interracial Couple Podcast.
Where it's not all black and white.
And we will see you next week.